you for hanging with us while we're trying to solve technical difficulties. Unfortunately, we weren't able to recognize in the meeting. But we have two very competent presenters here with us today. Who will both be sharing their work and their stories with us. So my name is Katia Chanel-Wanto. I'm a development consultant and philanthropy advisor. I also run an organization that is creating a community called the Philanthropy. So it's in the philanthropy circuit. And with me I have English Saul from Impact Thread, and I also have Terry from Families Without Borders. And please give them a round of applause. So as a consultant, several of the questions I get asked by philanthropists is, how much do I spend on a particular issue? What issue should I focus on? Where should I put my money? What country, what state? But you never hear the question, how do I measure the work that I'm doing? How will I know that I'm being successful, that I'm making a change, that I'm transforming people's lives? And I was really pleased to see that this workshop was being organized, because I think it's an issue that touches the heart of the work that both philanthropists and those implementing programs do. And I'm hoping that with my panel today, we'll be able to address some of your burning questions around measurement, around monitoring programs, and what sort of indicators perhaps you should be looking at. Now, we all work in different sectors, so of course it will vary whether you're health versus education or technology. But I'm sure that some of you, most of you, will be able to walk away with some new learning and new knowledge around monitoring and evaluation. So without further ado, I'd like to invite English to talk briefly about her work and her organization and tell us a bit about their focus areas.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, and thank you all for coming. I know it's right after lunch, so it's kind of like that nap time period. I'm the co-founder of an organization called Impact Thread, and basically what we do is we look at organizations and the workforce and how people relate to work overall. My background is in industrial organizational psychology, which is kind of a mouthful, so you have to remember it. And basically what I like to say is that that's sort of the best of data and statistics and behavioral economics and psychology and business all rolled into this one specialty. So I have a lot of fun with it. And so our organization, we really sort of take this idea of trying to measure these squishy variables of people and behavior and perspective and action and turn it into very quantitative outcomes and accessible information. So that's just a little bit about what I do and how I'm involved in the measurement field.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Katia, for doing this work. I am Terry Kansari, founder of Families Without Borders. And to take the confusion away, or confuse you even more, I was born and raised in Iran. I lived in Germany for 10 years. Then I now live in California, and the projects that I run are currently in Sierra Leone. So what we do is focus on, my educational background is very similar to English, industrial and organizational psychology, and corporate management and consulting, and everything led me to where I am today, which is starting an organization with a focus on education and empowering locals to build communities from within. And how we do it is we bring top students from extremely underprivileged, financially disadvantaged families to the program, which is a 4-year program, and it has 2 parts. One part is a college scholarship that includes tuition, housing, food, everything. And the other part is leadership development, extensive program with focus on community service and building communities. So our students have to come up with social problems that they can solve, and they form small groups. Between 3 to 6 months they have to solve a problem. So they learn how to identify and how to solve a problem, how to budget, and how to report. So everything will happen while they're in college, And when they finish, they have to sponsor another student and bring to our program. Since no one wants to be done with us, because we formed a very strong family, mix of all tribes and religions and everything that never worked together. They want to stay and they like to continue the work. Now, one recent example is our first graduate now is planning to build a school. He has saved enough money to build a school in a faraway village. All the students are going to that village to do the work, he's giving the money. So that's in a nutshell what we do in this area.
English, through your work, can you tell us what sort of best practices are out there when it comes to M&E, philanthropic programs specifically? So whether you're in education or a different sector, what are some of the basic tools that those in development can use to measure their impact?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all answer. I think that some of the basics are really, really important, and some of the fundamentals that people often miss when developing data dashboards and their metrics. I think that sometimes, especially small organizations, what I see is so much emphasis on figuring out what to measure. And often we do that before we define what success looks like or define our goals. And it's impossible to measure something that you can't define. So I think that's really step one, thinking about what does the world look like when your organization is no longer needed? And that is your metric of success. And working backwards from there is really, really a good place to start. I think that there's a myriad of tools out there, from data aggregation systems to EMRs to chatbot tools to supervision tools, all of which are very, very useful and very important. But I think also one thing that we fall into the trap of is thinking that just by the act of collecting data that we've done our job. And a great example, unfortunately, is like the Ebola epidemic. A lot of that issue and a lot of the sort of spread of that epidemic happened because we didn't get the data from the non-responders, and we got the data from the people that were showing up. And I think that that's really important to remember too, is that even if you have like the best system in place and you're collecting all of this data, you have to think about the data that you're not collecting and the people that you're not hearing from, because often that's where so much of the learning can come in. I think that one thing about metrics that's also just really important to remember as you're choosing your tools and as you're sort of creating your data dashboard and what it is you need to look for is that really what metrics are for is trying to get at what your next move is as an organization. They're learning tools. They're not outcomes in themselves. So it's not always about sort of the new fancy technology of how you're getting your data or how you're putting it into your system. It really is about asking questions that are going to point you in the direction of your next move. And I think that there's also sort of a gap between the conversation of nonprofits and funders in that way. And I think funders look at metrics a lot of times and say, okay, this is a great outcome, and that's great, and we can leave it and we can measure it again next year at the end. That's not really how this tool is supposed to be used. I love statistics, and I'm a statistician, and I'll be the first one to tell you that you can get the data to say a lot of things, and sometimes not all of those things are true. And so a lot of what it means to measure something is ensuring that what your data is saying is actually telling the story of your impact and telling the story of your organization, and not just sort of random outcomes that sort of come through. So yeah, I think that's...
Thank you. You made an interesting point about measurement, and Peter Drucker, I don't know if you know him, but he's a management guru, and he said, you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So Terry, do you want to tell us what in your organization are you measuring in terms of your programs and their impact? Can you share some of those?
Sure. what we measure is the impact and how long does it last. And the way we do it is we look at programs and projects. And our students are trained to create an eye and a heart and a mind for looking at these things. When they go to village, our students are involved in a wide variety of community service projects. One of them is adult literacy. At the end, everyone who's in the program and gets a certificate should be able to read and write their name, sign, calculate basic things. So when they say fill that banana on their head, they don't miscalculate and give back more money, which I experienced, and that was one reason we started adult literacy program. And when they want to go and get a microloan, they can sign their name. Very, very basic things, and that's how we measure. How many people did we educate so they can take care of the basic needs with the literacy that they have now? In terms of raising awareness in health or improving agriculture or legal awareness, all of those, they assess at the end what they have done and what people know and what they do, and they usually go back and talk to people in the village to see what it is. We just promote the mindset that whatever you want to do, think about how many lives does it change, does it impact, and how well does it impact those lives. And basic examples, like we have annual gala in America where I raise money. And I was thinking, what can I take as a gift for people who help the organization and fund our work? In addition to money that I put into it, there are other people who give. So I thought I'll take bags with African fabric with Families Without Borders logo on it. So I can go easily to a place and order those bags. But as a lesson to the students, I said, hey, instead of going and ordering from a tailor who has already a business, what if we find a woman who has children and we want to help change her life? We buy it, she works somewhere, now we buy a sewing machine and we give the job to her and we get a discount, and we have something like this. I'll show you. These are the bags that I give when we have events and galas, and they're made by a woman who has children and didn't have any business, and now she has a business. This is not what we do, but this is what they learn. And if there's time, Joseph can share something that I have two of our students here with me, they're helping. And most recently, the mudslide in Sierra Leone happened, and I asked the students, what is it you could do? Can you identify a need that you can solve a problem with mudslide and all the people who are dead and those survivors? And they had a great experience. They came up with a program. I don't know if there's enough time now or later. So we can share how they do it. So that's how we measure. We ask one simple question. How many people do we serve? How long does it last? How well do we serve the people that we serve?
So it's a combination of surveys, sort of face-to-face, interviews, and then what about the longer-term impact? So are you checking in with your alumni? Because I'm assuming you have people who pass through your program.
Yes, we have one graduate who has graduated a couple of years ago. The organization is young. Two people are finished with school, and the official ceremony is in February, and nobody wants to leave. People feel this is a family that they don't want to separate from, and they just stay and they keep doing good work, and they keep asking what else can we do. So they stay involved in now building a school by a graduate who didn't have money to survive is a big measure for impact, that it goes down multiple ways to a level that we could not do if we wanted to do all the small work ourselves. So the students are empowered to do the work. When they go to interviews, another example, one of my students just finished second year. For the summer, he applied for internship. And when he shared in the interview what he has done for Families Without Borders, they said, oh, you know as much as the manager in the department that we want to have you in. And they made him be in charge of a lot of different things in that company, and they offered him a job. He said, I have to finish my studies before I start working. So this is the quality of people that we train, and that's how we can claim we have highest return on investment, because every single person in our organization gets trained to do a lot more than other people.
when we talk about measuring and impact and monitoring, all this big language, where does the responsibility lie in terms of who should be measuring, who should be monitoring? Is it the grant-making organization, the philanthropist, the donor, or is it the organization implementing the grant, or is it both of them? Where does this responsibility lie? And if you could, if let's say it's both on both sides, how would you prioritize that?
I think it's everyone's responsibility. I think that, you know, I say that because I think all of us in this room have decided to commit our lives to something that is mission-driven in one way or another. And I think we owe it to ourselves and the people that we're serving to, in a very tangible way, be able to say what we're doing is working or not working. I think that on the nonprofit side, it's really, or the organization side, the grantee side, it's really important to form a culture of measurement within your organization. I think that's really the responsibility of the nonprofit. And you know, I think it's, from what I've witnessed from some of my research, it's really hard to translate data into a narrative and narrative into data. And embedding that early on in your organizational culture is very important, because some funders respond to data, some funders respond to anecdotes, some funders respond to the overall story of your organization. And being able to seamlessly flow between all of these is really what's going to get people to buy in to your work and to your story. I think on the funder side and on the philanthropist side, you know, we have to do a better job of enabling these organizations to collect data. We have to be able to fund it. We have to say, yes, I am committed to funding M&E. You know, I think that the language sometimes is really intimidating. So, you know, I'm lucky in this space. I wear a consultant hat and a funder hat. And when I work with an organization, I don't really ask them, what are your metrics? I ask them, how do you know what you're doing is working? And that enables us to have a conversation about it. Because what I've seen happen before is that, you know, metrics are this amazing tool that demonstrate your successes and your failures. And the failure part can be really intimidating to talk about. And I think when it comes to that donor, you know, that grantee-grantor relationship, in order to be able to truly utilize metrics to their full capability, we have to reframe the conversation and really make it a collaborative effort. I'll also put a plug in for data sharing between organizations. I think that this is something that doesn't quite happen enough. And I think that there's probably information that Terry's organization is collecting that can be used by a different organization at this conference. And so being able to really make those flows of data transfer and data sharing transparent and readily available, I think will really elevate the M&E space overall.
Thank you. I think a very interesting point about failure. And I think it's one that organizations are now sort of trying to look into a bit more deeply and trying to even do some risk management around failure. And it would be interesting to hear, Terry, what does that look like in your organization? How do you deal with when you don't meet your targets or your goals? And how does it affect your planning for your programs?
We are a young organization, and at the beginning you always face failures and successes, and you go based on success. When we started almost 8 years ago, the organization started with a focus on helping younger children and eventually building schools and digging water wells and going to rural communities and literally fixing the problem. And on this time we had one college student that now grew to 50-something. And that one was something that was not the focus. We were just doing a variety of things. And when I built when we provided funding and built the second school, which was a secondary school in a village, we ran out of cement in the middle of the project, and I asked what happened. Sure enough, the people who were supposed to watch the project were not there, and the school poured the foundation twice as big as it was supposed to be because they were greedy. They wanted to have a big school in the village and look good and stand out. So the whole school building project cost us so much more, almost twice, because we didn't know what we were doing. So at the end of it, we didn't have that many students in that school, and the money was not well spent. So as it was a big lesson. Yes, money was not well spent. The school was built, but we could have another school in another village with that money. Now, as we started shifting towards giving the authority and empowerment to the locals, which are responsible young men and women who are running our programs there, we don't make those extreme mistakes anymore because they know what is needed. They go and identify the problem and they do analysis much stronger and better than we would do from outside. So I don't make suggestions for problems and I don't get involved. I ask what are the problems and we do this. We have discussions, how much of it is real, how do we serve, and there are a lot, I mean, I cannot say huge mistakes. We are not making those mistakes anymore because everything is done from within. And that's what makes us stand out. The work is done through locals who know the problems. When we go to villages, most of our villages are villages from our students. And we go and identify the need, do analysis, and that's where things go in a completely different way compared to when we were coming up. Oh, this village doesn't have a school or doesn't have a well. Now they go and repair a water well that was not working for 10 years, and now 700 people have clean water, and it costs us less than $200. When I was digging a well, it was $7,000. So those are the mistakes that we learn and we are not making anymore.
Thank you for that. I think that insight is very helpful. But speaking on the well issue, there's an interesting story, and I'm sure most of you have heard this, about a funder who, similar scenario, goes into a community and decides that what they needed was water, and built a well, but nobody would use the well because they wouldn't be prepared to actually walk how many kilometers far away to go fetch water, because that was the only opportunity that they had to spend time with their friends, chat and gossip, and just really live their lives. So there's also this idea of not understanding community needs, which is where I think M&E plays a critical role in that early stage planning. You know, are we asking the right questions in the communities when we're doing that work? And I wanted maybe for you to highlight that English is what sort of pre-work should organizations be doing before embarking on big projects or small projects, wherever they may be? What are the questions beyond what does success look like? What are the sort of evaluative questions funders should be looking at?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm going to share another anecdote around that same genre. A big bilateral, I won't name them, decided to do a project where somebody came in and was like, you know, it would be great, let's put a carousel on top of these wells so that the children would play on the carousel and it would generate water. So the mistakes that were made there, which they didn't realize until about 6 months later when they went back into the community, people were paying the children to play on the carousel at all hours of the day, because it took the carousel working 27 hours a day in order to create enough water for the community. So first mistake right there, not understanding the basic needs and basic numbers of the community that you're serving. I think that really, I know it's been mentioned a lot throughout this conference, but having very sort of clear pathways to the community and understanding and really sourcing the needs. I mean, you may have a unique intervention, which is wonderful, but ensuring that intervention fits the community that you're serving is really, really important. So I think that's pre-work step number one, is making sure that, almost prototyping your intervention to an extent with the people that you're wanting to serve. I think the other thing to really think about is, when you're thinking about how to develop your metrics and what questions to ask, it's a great idea to do sort of a scan of the environment of what data is already out there there's a lot of proxy measurements that we maybe don't really realize that are really indicative of overall outcomes or overall results. I'll give you one example. In the States, there's a proxy measurement that we use, which is the 3rd grade reading level. And we found that this is a huge predictor of high school grades, college acceptance, college graduation. So by knowing what a child's 3rd grade reading level is, we can then be able to say, okay, well, the child has, a very high probability of graduating college if their reading level is at this rate. Infant mortality in the global sphere is a really good proxy measurement for different socioeconomic effects, different breastfeeding, nutrition. There's a lot of different things that infant mortality numbers can tell you. And so thinking about your intervention, especially in the greater sphere of what data is out there, what data is being collected, and what outcomes are really, being looked at in the bigger picture, I think could really help you narrow down sort of your intervention in your organization and how your data is then going to relate to the overall system.
Sorry, Terry, do you want to add anything to that?
I think she said it all. it was wonderful. Yeah, it's activation sphere. That's what we do it in practical life.
Okay. All right. So before we go to questions, I just wanted to, ask one final one around the power dynamics that exist between, and I think you touched on this earlier, the grant-making organizations and the ones implementing the work. When it comes to measurements, how do you see that power play either affect or not affect the outcomes? So when money is involved in that relationship, how does it affect the impact of the programs or the measurement?
In our case, they definitely need to know the impact. They need to know numbers. You cannot qualify for the next grant from the same organization if you don't do proper reporting. And proper reporting involves giving the right numbers and lives that are changed and results that are created. That's my experience.
Yeah, I think the power dynamic is one that does ultimately affect outcomes in a lot of ways. And I think that one thing that is difficult is sometimes you have grantees or grantors coming in and saying, like, I know that, like, first of all, if you have a unique intervention, it's not uncommon for some of your measurements to also be unique. And that is something that's important to figure out how to communicate to funders. I think that sometimes as funders, we may come in and we may say, well, why aren't you measuring infant mortality? Why are you measuring birth rate? And so having a justification for your metrics is really important, but being able to communicate about your metrics is really, really key. And being able to sort of use empowering language, identify the value proposition between yourself and the grantee or the grantor, and really trying to say, like, look, we're measuring this because, and relating it to your overall mission, and saying this is why we're measuring X, this is how we're measuring X. And I think, the last part really is to be able to step back and think that, metrics and evaluation, again, is a tool. Just like a pencil is a tool. What you write with that pencil is completely, it's unique and it's a story and it's a narrative, just like the way data should be used. Data is a tool, and what you say, what you convey with that data is your story as an organization. And so I think when it comes to M&E, the way that it is communicated is just as important as the actual numbers themselves.
Thank you. Do you want to give them a round of applause? I'm not sure how much time we have for questions, because I know we started a bit late. Is there any questions? Please.
Okay. My question really is to you, English. You said that just as important as the data you're collecting is the data you're not collecting. and the people that kind of fall by the wayside. We've really found this out. I work at WAVE in our experience here in Lagos. But what we struggle with is, how do you keep track of, have you seen models where people have been able to keep track of participants 1 year or 2 years down the line, and what have they done to do so?
Some of the best models that I've seen really are focused almost on this like sort of two-way communication of like a chat bot or like a text message, like SMS sort of thing. The key is really sort of incentivizing your respondent to respond. So some models that I've seen, especially like when it comes to like postpartum, so women who have just given birth, it's really sort of like this follow-up texting platform, but they sort of prime it with just like a few tips or like a few things that women can do if their baby's colicky or if their baby's not breastfeeding. So ensuring that your respondent is getting something out of the interaction is really, really key and can really, really help your uptake in data collection.
And just to add to that, I think it also depends on your numbers in terms of how many people you're following up with. If they're under 100 or under 50, you may consider some sort of manual methods, whereas if they're above 100, I would suggest creating a platform. Again, depending on level of education and all of that, but creating a platform so that you can actually keep in touch and follow up.
Is it unusual to have both grantee and grantor co-create a tool right from the beginning? Because that sounds to me like that could be like the, sort of the ultimate good tool.
I think your observation there about having a grantee and grantor create a tool together is really important. That's actually a project that we're working on right now in Zimbabwe, is creating an electronic medical record with our grantee to ensure that community health workers can use it in the field and that there's sort of a continuous feedback on their patients. It really is important, and I think that how do you know when you've created a good tool? When you can sit there and say, I've collected quality data, meaning that I can get a picture of the whole person that I'm trying to serve. I think that when you have, when you feel like you ask the right questions that are beginning to get answers towards your measures of success. So are we succeeding in this way? Is my intervention affecting the lives of these people? I think that sometimes where the real stickiness comes in is measuring that difference between going from survival to thriving in a community, and being able to capture that with a tool, I think is really unique and can be really, really effective.
You said it very nicely, yeah. The good tool is when you know it worked and how it served, how many people it served, and how well it served, and if it works again, if you can repeat it, if you can use it again in another project, in a similar project.
I wanted to get your perspective on when your beneficiaries are very young and it's going to take a long time to be able to measure the impact of your program. What do you advise is a good way of keeping your funders at least happy that you're making progress even though your beneficiaries are still very young and it's hard to tell?
Can I ask how old they are and what your work is, so we make it more specific?
Okay, so Junior Achievement is an organization that teaches financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and work readiness to young people in primary and secondary schools. But the program for the primary and secondary schools is harder to demonstrate. Even the secondary schools is easier, but the primary schools it's really hard to demonstrate impact that, okay, I've taught them financial literacy and now they are financially literate, so here's the impact I've done. How do you really show the outcomes? I mean, you can talk about your activities, but how do you show impact on outcome?
Quantitative data is one thing, how many students you've taught, and measuring how much they took and what they can do with it would be a next step, which I guess
yeah, I think one thing that I would, well, two things. This is, I think, where storytelling comes in really handy, and sharing the narrative of the individual students. I think often we use metrics as say, okay, here's the end result, here's impact. But what we miss is like the actual just difference, like from going from point A to point B, and how impactful that is. And so going from no financial literacy to financial literacy, when we're talking about human capabilities, like that's huge. And so really elevating that story and saying like, look, you know, these skills that these people are learning, like no one can take those away from them. They'll have these skills for the rest of their life. And we're talking about enabling people and providing them the tools to get through life. I mean, that's a huge impact right there. So it really is sort of about framing, you know, the level of impact, and without being able to say, you know, we've done X, Y, and Z numbers.
I know of a program that basically uses scenarios to teach children, or rather to evaluate the lessons that have been taught in financial literacy. So for example, taking a child or children to a bank to see, you know, well, if they've been taught how to use an ATM, or if they've been taught how to, you know, do basic transactions, can they actually then implement it in real life? Or saving. I know a program where they give children piggy banks to save money. So checking in, I guess, you know, I think you should have short-term indicators, medium-term indicators, and things that you're evaluating along the way, so you don't have to sort of wait till they're 15 to figure out did our program when they were 5 years old have an impact. So we're just going to take 2 last questions. Please keep them brief. We've been warned 3 times that we've run over time.
So first of all, Katia, English and Terry, thank you very much for the moderation of the 2 different presentations. So I have a quick question for you, English first. You said something like you can interpret figures as you want. And some figures tell things and some figures do not tell things. Could you give us a recent concrete example of that, where you were confronted with this and you had to give some kind of interpretation? Now, Terry, I had the privilege of meeting you yesterday, and I'm completely convinced you actually do the opposite of English. English is more a theoretical framework she interprets. Terry comes from the grassroots and grows. So my question to you is, knowing what you've been doing for the last 8 years, I think, is where would you like to be in the next 5 years? Have you got, out of all the statistics and the measurements that you have or have not done, have you been able to extrapolate and see where you will be in 5 years' time? Thank you.
I think it was a statistician named George Cox who said, all statistical models are wrong, but some are useful. And that is data. And a concrete example actually would be something along the lines of really going back and looking at what questions you're asking. So I did some work with Robin Hood, which is an organization that deals with homelessness in New York City. And they're heavy, they're metric heavy, they love metrics. And so, you know, at first they were looking at the drop-off rates of their programs. And basically, they saw that there was a really significant drop-off rate after a certain intervention point. And they went back and they looked and they were like, why are so many people dropping off? And they deemed this as a failure. And so the data told us that there were so many people dropping out, and so that this intervention point was actually failing. But then at further scrutiny, we found out they were dropping out because they were getting hired and they were getting jobs. And so we had to go back and we had to look at our measures and we had to say, oh, actually this is a success. So sometimes looking at the data doesn't tell you the whole picture. It's really important to go and do that due diligence and find the story.
In 5 years, we see ourselves in 2 additional West African countries expanded. And that can only happen when we have enough graduates who can take the flag and move on and start the work, and enough qualified, capable people who can go on and expand, elaborate on the work. And we see that our students can start NGOs and movements in Sierra Leone, and that will start impacting a large number of lives. In the last retreat that we had, the entire discussion was turned to be around child slavery in Sierra Leone. And there is a girl, I was shocked about her energy. I mean, positively, and that she has a mission now after the discussion to start something to eliminate, not even reduce, child slavery in Sierra Leone. She's 19-year-old, and everyone is on board with her. They're thinking about starting an NGO. So these big things are things that are happening there, and in the next 5 years, I cannot say we could not have touched probably hundreds of thousands of lives in Sierra Leone and starting to expand to other countries. Every graduate in our program has to sponsor another student to the program. And the sponsorship is only for college tuition. The rest of it comes from us. We do definitely need additional funding. Funding is always a problem for all nonprofits that we're facing, and we are looking for ways to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hate to be the spoiled sport, but I want us to thank English and Terry for an amazing job.